Should we fear AI or embrace it, or is the truth somewhere in between? Do we even know yet what to think and what to presuppose? Let's bring in an expert on this issue. He is a frequent friend of the show. Welcoming back Jake Morabito. He is the Senior Director of Policy at the American Legislative Exchange Council, focusing on these technology issues and AI and more. Jake, good afternoon. Welcome back to News Talk STL.
Thanks so much for having me on, Tim. Really excited for the discussion today.
Yeah, Jake, so how about that 35,000-foot question? And maybe this is more philosophical than public policy driven. Should we fear AI, Jake, or should we embrace it?
I think, like you said, unfortunately, the answer is somewhere in between, right? I think if you're not worried, you're probably not paying close enough attention. It is a very transformational technology, perhaps more transformational than even the internet. So that means there's going to be some disruption. Some jobs are going to change. Some industries are going to change. But I think what you've seen so far, there's been a lot of case studies of maybe people rushing too quickly to, replace, journalists or other colleagues. I'm just going to have AI create all of my content. What could possibly go wrong with that, right? And then it's going to get some facts wrong or make some obvious mistakes. So you are still going to want to have humans in the loop, especially on some really important decisions. So I don't think they're gunning for your job just yet. And there was actually a recent study out of Stanford University that showed about 50% of the public is they're optimistic about AI, but then those white collar professions are concerned. Maybe I don't have a job in 5 years. So what does that mean?
And Jake, maybe the way to figure out what might happen in the future is to kind of look to the past, right? This is not the first time we in the United States of America, or even on the world stage, have experienced a revolution, right, in the workforce or in industry. I mean, we're not running things off of actual horses with horsepower anymore. We're not even using steam locomotives, right, at this point in time. We have been through automation, as you mentioned. We've been through the internet revolution, Y2K, such and so forth. So, Jake, this is another advancement that humans are making. It's not like the machines are doing this all by themselves. This is human technology creating this type of advancement, and it's another form of a type of an industrial revolution, right?
Yeah, you're so right to compare it to those foundational technologies like steam power and the locomotive and the automobile. It certainly is that. And what we're running into some trouble is, especially at the state level, government is they're rushing in from a position of fear to regulate the technology. And the risk there is if you don't have a thoughtful, measured approach based in reality, not on science fiction movies like Terminator or 2001: A Space Odyssey, then you're going to preemptively shut down a lot of the benefits that you and I, as consumers and everyday Americans, that can benefit from the technology. It can help me start my next business venture, or help me make my life more efficient, or make sense of the world around me even better, create new entertainment options. That's not to say that, there won't be some disruption along the way. So there is a role for states and for the federal government to legislate and regulate AI. But some of the proposals that I've highlighted in my recent report, they're not it. So.
Indeed. Yeah, Jake, I'm probably accidentally guilty of some of the fear mongering when I refer to like Skynet and things like that, and the Matrix along the way. But, science fiction, science fact, sometimes the line's a little blurry. Jake, by the way, folks, we're speaking to Jake Morabito. He is Senior Director of Policy at the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC.org. Jake oversees a lot of issues at ALEC, including communications, technology, energy, environment, agriculture, and more. Jake, speaking of the states, ALEC always tries to help the states with these types of massive disruptive changes, helping them try to develop, working as a partner on best practices. At ALEC, you've all developed the State AI Policy Toolkit. Tell us about that.
Sure. So I mentioned before that there's some states that, like California, New York, Illinois, the usual suspects, that are leading as far as what not to do as far as technology or supporting our innovators. doing a more measured approach to policy. So what should states do? So we have this ALEC State AI Policy Toolkit that is the definitive guide for not only legislators, but also business leaders, concerned citizens too. Like, what are the forward-thinking policies that can help your state become the next hub for, becoming a leader in this new AI technology? But how do we also protect kids and consumers from the real risks from things like deepfake images online or appropriate use of technology in schools? And then finally, as far as the government's perspective, is there too much regulation or outdated regulation in place that's holding us back on some of these transformational technologies? So we actually have 7 specific model policies in this toolkit that anyone can read up today. It's written in plain English. You don't have to be a lawyer or a tech attorney to understand it here. So they're kind of ready-made ideas that any legislator, including those in Missouri, should look at if they want to become leaders in AI.
Folks, that's available at ALEC.org. ALEC's a very open and transparent organization. ALEC.org, nonpartisan, and members, I believe, legislative members from all 50 states of the union. Jake, what's the interplay like in this subject matter area between the federal government and the states? Like, is there something going on the federal level where they're wrestling with these issues as well? And how does that interplay, as regards like federal preemption issues and things that states should be concerned about?
You're right. So AI and data center policy have been top priorities for President Trump's second administration. Pretty early on, he quickly rescinded the former president's sweeping AI executive order that strictly regulated the technology. You may have heard he also put forward a federal AI action plan that essentially is a more forward-looking template. How do we make sure we have the right infrastructure investments in place when it comes to things like data centers or energy generation and transmission to make sure we're leading not only in data centers, but also in the next generation of manufacturing and semiconductors and things like that too, that are highly energy intensive. But also what they did, like you mentioned, is the president signed an executive order last December trying to limit some of these state bills that have been crossing the finish line that contradict those federal goals. So there's this kind of tussle between federal and state as far as the appropriate role. It's a classic federalism debate happening here. And what I've seen is what's probably more successful is when states are more focused on specific consumer harm issues. Like I think over 3/4 of the states by now have passed legislation cracking down on the use of AI deepfake images to send child sex abuse material or non-consensual intimate images. I think a lot of people agree that's clearly a no-no and is usually already against the law in most cases. So clarifying that, tightening up existing laws and existing frameworks, that often is a lot better than creating sweeping new regulations.
Jake, you brought up data centers, hot topic across the country. I want you to know it's a hot topic here in the St. Louis region and all across Missouri because a ton of them are being proposed. I work with a lot of organizations like ALEC who touch this field. I work with other organizations that are advocates for data centers. Before anybody asked my opinion on data centers, I was a fan of them because I know what they are. They're places that store data. That's why they're called data centers. And we better have, we in America, we Americans better be cornering the market, on AI, technology and advancement and on data center storage and capacity, or people who don't have our best interests at heart around the globe, a lot of geopolitical concerns here, they will be happy to leapfrog us on that. So, Jake, I don't know if ALEC has any specific positions on data centers, but there are issues of energy consumption and water consumption. I think, Jake, once again, there's a lot of fear of the unknown here. Do you find that, and that maybe people are just not sure exactly what a data center is, does, or functions, and maybe that's why they're concerned about it going anywhere in their communities?
You hit the nail on the head there. As far as data centers are not particularly popular, I currently live in Virginia, which is actually the world's capital of data centers. I think we have around 600 data centers in Northern Virginia alone. So we outpace the rest of the country by far. But like you said, increasingly every state's dealing with these issues, and they don't look glamorous from the outside. They're essentially these big warehouses that, like you mentioned, they underpin the entire digital architecture that we rely on every day for things like Google Maps or our email services or our Netflix. All of it runs through fiber optic cables and data center servers somewhere. And if we're going to continue to use those tools and build AI, we need that infrastructure in our country. But like you said, there's these real energy related concerns. And a lot of that is not the data center's fault. It's because of bad energy policy. Some states in particular, like Illinois and others, have specifically made it more difficult to generate electricity through things like clean energy mandates, or again, moratorium on sources like nuclear energy, that if that was online, then we wouldn't be having the same conversation. We'd have energy abundance. Instead, we have energy shortages that are artificial. So that's what I would suggest from the ALEC perspective is let's focus on getting energy policy right, because then we can have the best of both, where you don't have rising electricity rates, you have some measured environmental policy to protect watersheds, and then you can still have the next generation of AI.
Indeed. Jake, before we let you go, anything else you want to direct our listeners to at ALEC.org, or any other subject that we didn't quite touch on related to this very interesting and vast field of artificial intelligence, data centers, and beyond?
Absolutely. On this topic, too, ALEC puts out every year a ranking called the Energy Affordability Report, which actually measures the average cost of electricity across the states. So you can see how Missouri ranks when the latest one comes out at the end of this month. But no surprise that a lot of the most expensive states are those, the New England states that belong to cap and trade programs, or again, have stifling clean energy mandates that make it harder to use reliable sources of electricity like natural gas or nuclear power that, for the sake of not being clean or renewable, quote unquote, these systems are being disfavored to put up more solar and wind, which can be part of the equation. But as we just saw with the recent winter storms, if you're backstopped entirely on intermittent sources like solar and wind, you can get into a lot of trouble.
Indeed. That's Jake Morabito. You can find him at ALEC.org and at The Prodigy Jake. Jake, what does that mean? I don't think I've ever asked you that. Is that something I shouldn't ask you on air?
Kind of like Prodigy, Jake, Prodigy. Get it?
I love it. Prodigy, yes. The Prodigy, the Prodigy on Twitter, X, ALEC, ALEC, ALEC.org for more information on this, the State AI Policy Toolkit and more. Jake, great conversation. Really enjoyed it. I think you enlightened not only our audience, but myself as well, as you always do. And we'll look forward to having you back on again soon.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you as well. Jake Morabito there.